Hi, everyone, and welcome as you filter into the webinar. We'll be getting started in just a few moments, but welcome, everyone. Welcome to all who are joining the webinar today. We have a really wonderful international group of people coming. So if you'd like to put in the chat where you are from, where you're hailing from today in the world, it'd be great to know exactly who we have with us today. We'll just give it a few more minutes before we get started to allow everyone to join. Giving it a few more minutes. We have lots of representation here from New York, from Florida, from Germany. Wonderful to see you all here today. From Jerusalem, truly an international group here today. Good evening from the Netherlands. It's like our own sort of Olympics here, isn't it? I've been really enjoying watching all of the Olympic events over the past few weeks. So another attendee from the Netherlands, welcome. Great to have you all with us. Great to see you all. We're having a few technical issues on the back end. And so we've got a link going out to our first speaker, Jean Quinn, who's the co-chair of the working group to end homelessness. So she's just having a little bit of trouble connecting. So as soon as she joins us, we'll get started. Colleagues from Nigeria on the line with us today, from Canada, from Pennsylvania. Great to have you all with us today. From Dublin, truly an international group. For people who need translation into Spanish, we have that set up today. If you'll look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the a little globe icon, the interpretation globe. You can select that and have all of the presentations today will be delivered in English. And so if you need that translated into Spanish, you can go ahead and select that option. And our translator is on the line and will be translating live simultaneously while we are talking. So you'll see she just had come off camera for just a quick moment to wave, but she's behind the scenes working very hard to translate our English into Spanish for our Spanish language colleagues. If you have any trouble kind of connecting into that channel, go ahead and put it in the chat and our staff can provide you with more instructions. Okay, well, should we go ahead and get started? I think Gina's still having some challenges joining, but we'll continue working behind the scenes to bring her on. But Dr. Ify, I'm wondering if you would be willing to provide today's opening comments to the group.
Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. We are actually excited to have you guys join us. This side event is hosted by the UN NGO Working Group to End Homelessness. We have lined up speakers who would actually touch the issue of homelessness, poverty, and then achieving the SDGs. So we would continue when our moderator, gets in. We will allow her to take over. So our first speaker today is Dr. Enemona Adaji. Dr. Enemona is the youth representative to the United Nations for Worldwide Network Nigeria. He is also the founder of Voiceless Voices, which is a non-governmental organization that focuses on the provision of education and health to the most vulnerable in Nigeria, especially women and children. He is passionate about social justice and international development. Dr. Adaji is also an epidemiologist who is currently working with the UK Health Security Agency. Today, Dr. Enemona will be speaking to us on the topic of addressing homelessness for social well-being and dignity for all to achieve sustainable development goals. Dr. Enemona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ify, for the welcome and the warm regards. I really appreciate it. Let me put okay. So today, as Dr. Ify has mentioned, I'll be talking about addressing homelessness, focusing on well-being and dignity for all, and as a key to achieving sustainable development goals. So I would start with this quote from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And why this quote is actually what I begin with is because it states that everyone has the right to a standard of living that is adequate for the well-being of himself and his family. And this right should be protected in the event of any life changes, be it unemployment, sickness, disability, and anything that happens in anyone's life. These rights should be protected. And also, when people talk about homelessness, most people think only about a house or the lack of a roof over one's head. Yes, this is true. However, the house should be a person's dwelling place, promoting their general well-being by providing a sense of belonging, privacy, intimacy, and dignity. Already we see that the problem is not just about providing a house. So in the EU, in most EU countries, the right to a home, like having a home for your own is actually something that's embedded in most EU countries' constitution. And this is because the union believes that it is crucial in order to combat social exclusion and poverty. Hence, other regions can actually pick a thing or two from how the issue of homelessness is being dealt with across EU countries. So adopting a right-based approach has its benefits when it comes to tackling homelessness, and across the field, it's been put out across as an efficient way of dealing with homelessness. And I will try to discuss so many factors that makes this so. So if you are trying to tackle homelessness by any program or any solution, adopting a rights-based approach, first of all, you have to deal with the case with speed. So the notion of the right to housing, it defies barriers. So people should be housed as quickly as possible, meaning there should be a lower threshold. So the threshold for accessing housing should be as low as possible. So anyone who needs housing should get one depending on their situation. And also the issue of choice. The person being supported should be given a choice. So simply offering an option, to an individual, with the notion of take it or leave it, while not being respectful, would not promote the person's well-being. And the issue of support, there's no proper housing without appropriate support adapted to the needs of the person in question or the person we are trying to help. So this depends, providing support will determine the success of the program, generally. And also the quality of the accommodation that's being provided, the quality of the homes that are offered to people needs to, meet certain regulations, or it needs to be appropriate. And not just providing all these services, but how do we even prevent a person being homeless in the first place? So prevention must have an important role in any housing strategy, and it must be the most efficient way to secure people a home and make sure that they get out of this circle of homelessness. And obviously, providing all these solutions comes with its difficulties, and pre-pandemic times, these difficulties had already been lingering, but the COVID pandemic has actually brought them to bear. Increasing house prices, it's a global phenomenon. Because of COVID-19, house prices have actually gone over the roof, and also the lack of affordable rental properties. When someone is, is looking for housing, the bureaucracy of the procedures, you have to meet certain criteria, and also the time when. One of the programs, it takes time to actually make this possible. So these are actually difficulties that are being faced when we try to deal with the issue of homelessness. And homelessness, as we know, is an international crisis. It's present in every country around the world. And homelessness intersects fundamentally with almost all the 17 SDGs as both a consequence and increased risk of the problem these goals are set to actually solve. Therefore, homelessness must be addressed in order to achieve the SDGs. The SDGs can be dealt with, in silos or as individual problems, but we see that the problem of homelessness circles across each individual sector that the SDGs are meant to address. And as mentioned previously, a right-based approach, with dignity is more efficient than looking at individuals as victims of their circumstance, or a fault-based approach. These are I have 2 case studies here that I would have loved to discuss, but I think because of time, I'll just pick out the key points. When the slides are being distributed, you can actually go through them in your spare time. But the point here is the fact that this case study was in London, where a 34-year-old man, was homeless, and how his problem was solved was the fact that the social team that were actually trying to help his circumstance listened, to his individual case, and the time at which he was housed, is something other stakeholders, or governments and people working in this space should emulate, because they didn't seem to sound like experts that knew what he wanted, and also the quality of accommodation that was provided in this case study. It's not just providing sometimes hostels for homeless people without actually going there ourselves to see if these hostels that are provided are fit for purpose. But we have to actually put ourselves in the shoes of the people we are trying to help. And I'm sure that in the course of these events, other speakers would actually shed more light on the issue of homelessness from experiences from across the globe. So this was just like a brief starting point to shed light on the issue of homelessness and how it could be tackled, and also keeping the dignity of the people we are trying to actually help. So I'll just wrap up there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enemona, for that wonderful presentation. At this point, I would hand over to Hanta, who is actually our moderator. So Hanta is now online. Hanta, I hand over to you to introduce the second speaker. For the benefit of our audience, Hanta, she's a senior advisor, the diplomatic advisor to the president of the Senate in Madagascar. She has been with us at the UN, working, seriously to ensure that homelessness gets the attention it deserves. Hanta has been a career diplomat. She is also a professor, at the university. So today we are actually excited to have Hanta in our midst. So Hanta, the floor is yours. I hand over to you so you can continue from here. Can you hear me, Hanta? Okay. Yeah, Hanta, I hand over to you. You can go ahead and introduce the next speaker, who is Jessica.
Okay, I heard you. I think I have some problems with my my headphones, but if you can hear me like this,
yes,
you can hear me.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
I don't know if you can hear me. There's obviously some technical problems. I don't.
Yeah, go ahead, Hanta. We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Sure. We can hear you.
I'm sorry. We have a gas there. So we have some technical problems and the electricity has been cut. So it's a little bit dark here. No electricity. I'm trying to do my best. So I would like to, I don't know,
Dr. Ify, let's go ahead and have Jessica begin her presentation, and then perhaps Hanta's internet signal will get a little bit stronger and we can come back to her.
Okay.
Happy to start.
Okay, that's fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue. The next speaker is Jessica Hager. Jessica has been, for over a decade, she's been focused on social determinants of health, namely food security, and she currently serves as the Director of Health and Nutrition at the Feeding America organization. Jessica served as a co-lead of the inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Planning Team at Feeding America. So today, Jessica will be speaking to us on the topic eradicating poverty and hunger in all dimensions to end homelessness and achieve the 2030 agenda. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, it's great to be with you all today. As noted, my name is Jessica Hager. I'm Director of Healthcare Partnerships and Nutrition here at Feeding America, and have just been very honored to be on today's panel, as well as engaged in the work of addressing food insecurity over the last decade plus. We certainly recognize the relationship that exists between homelessness and food insecurity. And so today I'll share more about Feeding America's understanding of and work to address hunger in the United States, and interventions that we have utilized here, but that certainly are opportunities for global engagement. And certainly I will learn a lot from the other panelists today as well. And as we get into this, we'll note that, food insecurity, similar to experiencing homelessness, looks different for each individual. And so oftentimes these conversations are talking about the experience that exists within a spectrum. You can go to the next slide. I'll just move ahead, but on the next slide, I'll share a little bit more about Feeding America and our work. So for those who aren't familiar, we're a nationwide network of food banks here in the United States, serving every single community. We are the largest domestic hunger relief organization as well here in the US, and our mission is to advance change in America by ensuring equitable access to nutritious food for all, in partnership with food banks, policymakers, supporters, and the communities that we serve. On the next slide, it notes how we define food insecurity here in the United States. It's a household level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. So again, this is a national level government definition that we utilize to follow our statistics over year. I'll note that the sensation of hunger, or how we might talk about hunger, that is something that we all might experience. Those who maybe missed their meal today are experiencing the sensation of hunger right now, but you'll often hear folks talk about food insecurity and hunger as the same. So I just wanted to clarify that particular definition. On the next slide, we'll also look at the experience of food insecurity and what leads to it. Some of these are very similar, again, due to the economic conditions of homelessness as well as food insecurity. The drivers may be similar. So here, households experiencing food insecurity are more likely to have that experience should they include Black, Latino, and Native American individuals within the household. Should that household include children? If the household is headed by a single parent, especially if that parent is a female, they're more likely to experience food insecurity. Should an individual in the household live with a disability? Or even if we have found that if a member is a veteran of a recent war, they're more likely to experience food insecurity here in the United States. Additional drivers of food insecurity, which as we heard in the previous presentation, have been exacerbated during this time of the pandemic, include unemployment, income shocks, fewer assets. So again, not having a financial safety net when there are economic kind of shocks that are happening within a household, and then the high living costs. And here in the US, varying by community, by block, by state, the cost of living really varies. Next slide. And again, the experience of food insecurity, similarly to homelessness, is really rooted in one's inability to cover basic needs. And so I myself was on a federal program for food assistance when I was in school, and I was always making trade-offs between what I can pay for this week between food and other needs. And so we know that households visiting our network of food banks report making these financial trade-offs. 69% have had to choose between paying for utilities and food. 67 have reported choosing between transportation and food. 66 report having to choose between paying for medicine and food. And as we can imagine, the trade-off between medicine and food can have detrimental impacts as a domino effect of being unable to manage one's medical needs and dietary needs at the same time. And then here we'll see that 50% have had to choose between paying for housing and food. And often this certainly can lead to individuals then living in homes with other families to group up, family or friends, or no longer being able to afford a roof over their head and having to live in a shelter or other situations. So again, this is just something we recognize as, again, a constant trade-off and stressful decision that families are having to make. Next slide. Now, as we think about the domino effect of these experiences of food insecurity, here's a snapshot of what we know about the dual experience of homelessness. 5% of households served by the Feeding America Network meet the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's definition of homelessness, which I will note is a very specific definition and doesn't really encapsulate that spectrum that was talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. Similarly, food insecurity is not uniformly experienced by all members of the homeless population. So just because someone is experiencing homelessness does not always mean they're experiencing food insecurity or that it looks like the same experience. Persons experiencing chronic homelessness who are impacted by multiple challenges more often experience food insecurity. And then additionally, for households experiencing homelessness, food insecurity can be a stressor that over time may heighten the odds for nutrition-related physical ailments, jeopardizes psychological health by reducing an individual's energy level, cognitive abilities, and emotional resilience. We talk a lot about, in the space of food insecurity, which similarly in homelessness, the toxic stress that an individual consistently experiences, and again, the impact that it has on their health in many different ways. Next slide. So we share all that to kind of ground us in the understanding of one's experience. Mark is an individual here shown on this slide who has been experiencing homelessness and continues to experience homelessness. He was gracious enough to share his story with Feeding America and noted that when he learned about a food pantry, he actually ended up becoming a volunteer with that food pantry and now considers that community part of his family and friends. But Mark now is able to reliably access food and nutritious food for his needs while in the midst of living with homelessness. Some of the supports that our Feeding America network of food banks provide are no-cost food and service provisions to alleviate, again, those basic need budget trade-offs. So this looks like food banks, pantries, soup kitchen, and meal programs throughout the country. We recognize that specifically when serving and working with communities experiencing homelessness, that the partnerships between different community-based organizations are key. And so this may look like food pantries being housed within homeless shelters or food programs, We also know that it's important to have nutritious and culturally inclusive meals to meet folks who are coming from different walks of life, different cultural needs, dietary needs, and allergies. SNAP and WIC are two government programs I'll speak to shortly, but it is increasingly common to see these government program enrollment assistance brought into homeless shelters and feeding programs to support not only the immediate needs of individuals, but the longer term support. And related to that, we have dozens of culinary arts training programs throughout the country that are part of food banks that are helping and working with community members experiencing homelessness or who may not necessarily be homeless, but to develop culinary training skills so that they can go through what's often a year or more program and then have the training in place to get a job within the restaurant industry. We also recognize the importance of meeting people where they are. So we have mobile outreach vans that will go to libraries and parks and shopping centers, again, run by local food banks. And in one case, the mobile outreach van that visits folks, oftentimes who are experiencing homelessness, they're able to get staple food items, community resource materials, and in one case, even a work desk to fill out job applications, to get trainings, to access internet, which we know in this day and age is quite vital to one's ability to engage with society. And additionally, be able to get government program assistance to sign up again for the programs like SNAP and WIC. Additionally, on the next slide, as we think about meeting folks where they are and remembering the toxic stress that individuals are experiencing, how can we as service providers be trauma informed and interculturally competent when it comes to the services that we provide, including with the food? So again, not only trying to prioritize distribution of nutritious and culturally inclusive food and food that is tasty, which is always important, as we know consumption is the end goal there, but we also want to ensure that the food that's being provided is easy to open and prepare, recognizing not all individuals have a can opener, for example. We want to ensure that the programs are flexible and regularly access and provide regular access to food resources. And that SNAP and other benefit application assistance is increasingly built into the services that they provide. We call it, not only are you feeding the line, meaning providing food for the moment or for the day, but shortening the line. The end goal being that you're helping individuals access services that are available to them so that they can have reliable access to food, make less financial trade-offs, and in this case, perhaps put more of their monthly budget towards their housing to maintain that housing. And we also know that awareness and referrals of resources beyond food is really critical to, again, provide that holistic care as we as humans, of course, are living in a holistic and have holistic needs. And so how that can duly address both homelessness and food insecurity. On the next slide, it speaks more to the government programs that I had noted earlier. Apologies for the formatting here, but I'll speak to our largest federal program around nutrition assistance, which is SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. It is the nation's first line of defense against food insecurity in the United States. I myself was on the SNAP Application Assistance Program. You get a debit card. A formula essentially tells you how much money you get on that card every month, and you're able to go in a very dignified way and shop at the grocery store or the corner market or even the farmer's market to access food of your choice. We also have the Farm Bill, and it really targets a piece of legislation impacting our nation's agricultural policy and nutrition program. So SNAP is part of that bill. We also have the Emergency Food Assistance Program, known as TFAP, and a Commodities Food Program. So this is, again, an effort, a very large effort that the federal government puts together through a Farm Bill to fund these programs. We also have other efforts at the federal level, the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act, which supports child-focused programs, feeding programs during summer and after-school meals, school meals, and then the WIC program, which is specifically for women, children, and infants. And all of this, it's really important in my own learnings that this work increasingly becomes driven by and co-created with communities and those who are experiencing homelessness and food insecurity itself. So I really appreciated the dignity that was talked about in the previous conversation and presentation, and just how core that is to this effort as a whole. So at this point, I will pass it back to you, Dr. Ify.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that wonderful presentation. Is Hanta back? I don't think she is back. So we would move on to the next speaker. We have Miss Lavon Maurice Grant in our midst. So Lavon has been a social justice advocate for over 25 years, as well as an entrepreneur and an accomplished author. She currently works with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence as the Director of Community Engagement, where she would serve as a bridge to people most impacted by housing insecurity and its many related issues. So today, Ms. Lavon will be talking to us on the topic, the intersection between gender inequality and homelessness. Lavon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ify. Good morning, afternoon, and good evening to all those who are present, wherever you are from. I am so honored and privileged to have this opportunity. So thank you, Dr. Ify, and your staff and committee for having me. And I must give a huge, huge shout out and acknowledgement to the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence staff. They are in the house, and I'm so honored that they're here to support me and the work that we are currently doing. So thank you all for being here, and especially thank you to my supervisor, Heidi Notario, for helping me put all this together. So we could get started with the slides. So while we're bringing that up, my presentation, as Dr. Ify mentioned, will be connecting gender inequality and homelessness. And we could go to the next slide. As we all know, homelessness is a huge, huge issue. It didn't just start with COVID, and we've known way before COVID the huge disparities of homelessness and gender inequality among Black and Brown people and in their communities. So just to give you a quick overview, the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence provides a wide range of free, comprehensive, and individualized technical assistance, training, and specialized resource materials. And our mission is to strengthen and transform efforts to end domestic violence. Next slide, please. So when we think of gender inequality, right, the significant barriers for women experience homelessness. We know it is huge for women. It's not to say that men do not experience homelessness, but because of women's gender, we experience it much greater and at different rates and for different reasons. So a Pan-Canadian survey found that many women and gender diverse people who have experiences of homelessness have no money after paying for housing, and only 14.2% can make ends meet after paying rent. And as we get into this, I will share a little bit. I was in this position many years ago in my life of not being able to afford to pay my rent and other utilities, having to choose between to buy food, clothing for my children, or to pay rent and praying not to be evicted. So I will share a little bit about that as we move along. We know that women and gender diverse people still earn less than men, limiting access to an increasingly unaffordable housing market. And women are also more likely to have minimum wage or part-time employment, meaning housing is even more unaffordable for them. Next slide, please. So some unique challenges faced by women is that housing instability is 4 times more likely for women who have experienced domestic violence. And we know that to be true. Many of the women that we work with who deal with domestic violence, one of the reasons that they do not have housing is because they had to leave the home, and their credit may be, in bad shape because the abuser or the person that caused harm has run up their credit and caused them to have bad credit where they can't even afford to rent or lease a place for that matter. And 1 in 4 homeless women cite domestic violence as a major contributor to their homelessness. Next slide. Women, and in particular women facing intersecting forms of discrimination, racism, are significantly more likely than men to face housing instability due to both lower incomes and more challenges in securing and affording an affordable place to live in a high opportunity neighborhood. Between February and April of 2020, women lost 12.1 million jobs, and only a little more than half those jobs have returned. And even as the jobs return, particularly during COVID, women are having a hard time, going back to work, because of COVID, because of young children, and, just trying to figure out which is the best way to turn when there are little to no avenues or little to no resources for them to do so. Next slide, please. So other challenges women face are women evicted or threatened with eviction are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, high blood pressure than people with stable housing. Lack of stable housing can make proper storage of medications difficult or impossible for women who need prescription medication, which can have negative health consequences. And that's something, when I was putting this together, that's something, a lot of times we don't even think about of the prescriptions and medicines that people need and who are homeless and they don't have access, to those medications. And women and girls' vulnerability to homelessness and housing insecurity is highly associated with factors related to domestic violence, child marriage, lack of access to high-wage occupations, human trafficking, and lack of access to childcare. And we know in this country, and I'm sure globally, childcare is another huge issue and barrier that so many women face in today's society. Next slide, please. So almost 2/3 of trafficking survivors report being homeless or experiencing unstable housing at the time they were recruited. Sexual harassment in housing, such as landlord asking a tenant to engage in sexual conduct as a condition of obtaining or maintaining housing. It is illegal, and not just our landlords asking women to participate in sexual activities, they are also asking their children to participate and letting the woman know, if you do not allow this to happen, we're going to evict you or raise your rent where you cannot afford to stay, one way or the other. So we really have to keep those kind of challenges in mind when we look at gender inequality across the globe. Next slide, please. So the summary of some of the gender equality challenges are sexual exploitation, domestic and sexual violence, deteriorating health during reproductive years and menopause, access to menstrual products limited, lack of maternal health care plans, lack of safety and security, gender inequality in jobs, extreme depression, victimization. And one of the things also is, food insecurity, as the last presenter, talked about. Next slide. So some of the solutions, and those who know me know I'm always looking for solutions to all these needs that we have, and just some, and others may have different ideas of how you can work on solutions in your own community. So some of the solutions, just to put it out, is early intervention strategies, government intervention, community support, changing perspectives on the value of women and girls, education related to gender-based violence and homelessness. And I put an asterisk by this last one because this is a huge pet peeve for me, a huge issue that I really want to tackle. It's a hard, challenging issue, but I still want to take it on. Increase safe, affordable housing development stock. I don't know how we continue to talk about, housing and the lack of housing and vouchers when we don't have the housing available for those who are homeless. And so I think if we put our efforts, if we put our efforts in dollars, like the dollars, right, into building stock, into building development and figuring out ways how to work with good developers to put together affordable housing in communities, particularly Black and Brown, a lot of these issues would be alleviated. But for whatever reason, we have not done that. That seems like the right thing and the easy thing to do in my brain, but maybe somebody can convince me differently. So the last slide, you could go to the next slide, please. Just want to share briefly about my own experience with homelessness, with domestic violence, all those intersections that we talk about around gender inequality, and then turn it back over to our wonderful moderator, Dr. Ify. So, for me, I was homeless after I ended up getting shot 4 times. So I have a bullet in my head, one in my foot to this day, but I was shot in my head, my thigh, my butt, and my foot. And my 3 children witnessed this shooting by their dad. And I lived in a home, beautiful home. I was living a lifestyle of $100,000. And just to show you how the inequality, once I left my partner, my husband, I went into straight poverty. I could not find affordable housing. I could not afford affordable housing, let alone find it. And because of that lack of childcare, I had to send my children back to live with their dad. And he was never violent to the children. And so I sent the children back to live with their dad. Now, I wasn't shot yet, but I had to send them back. And I went to go visit. And in that visit, the next day, that's when my husband shot me 4 times. So housing instability and gender inequality is really serious. It's deadly to some of us and to some extent. And it could be really crippling for families and traumatizing and continued trauma for years and years and years, as I've experienced. I don't live on the margins anymore, thank goodness, but I'm here to help other women to not have to live in the margins, and for us to be accountable and responsible to help women and families, to help lift them up out of the margins based on what we've been through, based on what we know, based on how we know how to put strategies together and resources, and to seriously advocate for those living on the margins. Homelessness is so debilitating and so dehumanizing for so many families that the chronic homelessness of families, they never come back. It creates a lot of mental stress, a lot of mental health issues along the way, even for the children who don't do well in school. Somehow things worked out. I don't want to say somehow. I know with a lot of my faith and my prayers, things worked out for me. And that doesn't mean I was better than anyone, but for whatever reason, that purpose for me to do this work remained. And that is what I do. So outside of being shot 4 times, being homeless, I never turned to drugs, which I understand why women do. It is a horrible, horrible place to be. And so we are not giving these workshops and webinars for the sake of doing workshops and webinars. And the work that Dr. Ify and her committee are doing, we are doing this because this is real. This is happening today globally. Women are facing so many challenges, and we have got to find a way to just stop having webinars and really be able to come to you all to say, hey, this is what's working. This is what's working now, because we have created less barriers and come up with more solutions and put more financial resources into the issues around gender inequality, homelessness, food insecurity, and all these other issues that we bring to the table. So I'm going to end my presentation there, and hopefully you'll have some questions for each of us at the end. So thank you, Dr. Ify and committee, for allowing me this time to be here.
Wow, that was great. That was, I don't know how to describe it. Thank you so much, Lavon, for sharing your personal experience. I mean, this is what this side event is all about. This is actually what this side event is all about. And I just want to bring out one key issue that you raised, which is increasing safe and affordable housing units. That, I agree with you, will go a very long way in ending homelessness, including the other issues raised by previous speakers. So I'm happy that our our chair, that's the co-chair of the working group, is here. But, she will come in shortly after the last speaker would have given his presentation. Our last speaker is Dr. Indu Prakash-Singh. He has over 40 years of experience in the development sector, and he is a human rights defender. Dr. Indu is currently a consultant with large number of national and international development organizations. He has been part of the women movement and other civil society organizations. And he has written a number of books. But today, Dr. Indu will be speaking to us on the topic global and collaborative partnerships strategy to ending homelessness. Dr. Indu, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for this opportunity for me to talk about it. Just to quickly come to it, I agree with what the earlier participants have spoken about. And, so in terms of, I think the slide should be there, and maybe, if it's there, I can just speak to that. Yes, yeah. Can we go to the first slide, please? Yeah. Yes, yeah, first slide of this presentation. Yeah. So I think, the idea is that we are talking about ending homelessness, which means restoring homes as such. And the idea is, how is it that we can build global collaborative partnerships as a strategy to ending homelessness? So this presentation talks about it. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. I just want to quickly come to this part that, in India, of course, we've had health emergencies and all world over. And especially in Delhi, we have been able to handle it through shelters and food provisioning. And it worked well in 2020, 21, 22 also. And, I think that's one way of dealing with it in terms of solutions that we come to. I'll come to problems and will, at the end, of course, solutions also. Then also, I would say here that, for us, maybe right data is equally important. And, I want to make it very clear that some of the official data mechanisms that we have in the country, like census, which is a decadal census, every 10 years, we have found both in 2001 and 2011, how it's a fraud and a farce, that large number of homeless people have not been enumerated at all. This I mentioned in my book, City Makers. We also need to talk about, my other friends have spoken about housing. We believe that there has to be a housing continuum as a solution, which starts with shelters, workers' hostels, institute upgradations, and incremental housing, transitional housing, tenure, secure housing with title, assisted living, etc. So there is not one solution, because the problem of homelessness is multifaceted. And we need to handle it in a multi-dimensional way also, So that's the thing. Also, that livelihoods are key to solving homelessness. That's what we have learned in our 20 years of work with homeless people, over 20 years of work, in fact. Then, there is an organization in India, called the Banyan, working in Chennai, in South India. They have got this home again model, and which I would say, and I mentioned the links also in the presentation, so those of you can go and look at it, like which even the WHO talks about as a fantastic model of people suffering from mental illness and how they have come together to deal with mental illness in a home again model. So I think that's something which we can talk about. I don't have the time to discuss it in detail, but one can look in the links for it. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yes, as we also know that how homelessness has been out of SDGs altogether. Looks like, in the context of India, we have two Indias, India and the non-India. That is, in India, we have got where the rich reside, and non-India, where the poor minorities belong. Similarly, we've got two worlds, the world where the elite of the countries matter, and the non-world where the poor and homeless of these countries languish. So I think it's very important to have this perspective. Can you go back? Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Also, I think it's very important that the institutions have been bypassing the homeless, whether it's governments, bureaucracy, the least borrowed. Courts, the courts that we have are expensive and take a long time. Like it took us 10 years in Supreme Court of India to file a petition in 2003, and the matter came up in 2013. Not that easy either. So it's very important that, I think we need to have different mechanisms to support the work going on in different countries. The work that we all have been doing, I'm not talking only from India, but I'm talking from the human rights defenders perspective all across the world, that the people who are working with the homeless, on homelessness, it is not an easy work, it's much difficult, and we require support of each and every one. Recently, there have been attack on vendors and all, where even the High Court of Delhi has been playing a negative role. So I suppose that, when the livelihoods are attacked of people who are informal workers, they are rendered homeless. That's an important point. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. The issue is also that, there are a couple of organizations that have been running shelters in India, all across the country. They have not been paid for years at length. There is absence of homeless policy, though many state governments are working on it, like Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and all, they're preparing it. Can we go next slide, please? Yeah. One interesting thing which has really happened for all of us world over is that, Institute of Global Homelessness, which is called the Rough Institute of Global Homelessness, has been instrumental in leading the global and collaborative partnerships. It started from 2015. So the IGH's annual and biannual meets in Chicago, Scotland, and all, many of us participated in that, and that in a way brought in partners from all across the world, where we could discuss the issues of homelessness and the strategies to deal with the problem. So I think IGH played an important role. Then IGH came up with this Vanguard series approach, which is key to working in different cities and learning, taking lessons from there and incorporating in different cities. Then also we had this IGH and partnering with the world's big sleep out in 2019 on 7 December, which happened about 50 cities of the world as such. Then we also have the IGH and the NGO working group to end homelessness, through which we have had the inroads into United Nations. And of course, the IGH, WGH, and UN Commission for Social Development has come together to address homelessness, take it up as into SDGs. And recently, we've had IGH, WGH, and UN Habitat come up with a global homeless data initiative. We all are part of it, and it's growing. So there have been many international collaborations. Courtesy IGH has played a very important role, and WGH and UN Habitat and all have come together to handle this issue globally. And it's because of such initiatives that the issue today has come up at even the UN level. So we need to thank IGH for playing this important role, where some of us working in different countries came together to address it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Fortunately for us in India, we've had the former UN Special Rapporteur on Housing System, Dr. Milind Kothari, who was there to support our work. And he, in fact, supported it right from the beginning. We've had our networks in India, the SAM BKS as such, National Forum for Housing Rights, the Banyan, Chennai, and Koshish in Mumbai. They've had networks of, rehabilitating destitute people, mentally ill people as such. Impact India Consortium in like Bangalore. So there have been lots of networks within the country also that have been working. So a model of networking, a model of partnership in country and global is the order of the day, and it has worked in the past and will work in the future also. Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, I think, here, I think there are links to it that how is it that we build partnerships? It's an art, and we all need to work together as a larger team. And, the various UN bodies, the institutions of governance, federal, local, courts, media, CSOs, they need to ensure that we leave no one behind. And of course, in India, we've had lots of WhatsApp groups and all across the country. We work together. with linking different groups and organizations to address the issues in different states with the courts and as such, whether it's on evictions, whether it's against violence against women, whether it's, action for change and all that. So we have been able to address the issues in large measure. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, I think this is the last slide where, we're saying that at the United Nations, we need to take up the issue of homelessness on the front foot to address it immediately, then take it up for later years. Homelessness has to be seen as a crime against humanity, period. Don't stigmatize homeless people. The homeless have suffered a lot due to stigma. Not everybody is born a drug addict. Societies make them whatever they are today, Then homelessness has to be added as an indicator to the Human Development Index, HDI. Then methodology mix and regular studies, then one-off like the census data once in 10 years, to be used to understand homelessness in order to eliminate it and assure homeless for all. Zindabad and thank you. And of course, I strongly believe, and we strongly believe, that we can end homelessness, but we can end homelessness by partnering with everyone across the world. It can't be done in silos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Indu. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I cannot agree with you more. Let me just bring out one or 2 points that you raised. You said, do not stigmatize the homeless. I agree with you, because oftentimes homeless people are seen as criminals, Yes. And then the second point which you raised is that the UN needs to take on the front foot. You see, this is why the working group has been set up. The working group to end homelessness have been on their toes day in, day out, lobbying, both the UN and the member states to take on this issue of homelessness. And today we have one of our partners, one of our advocates in the person of Hanta. Don't worry, you will soon hear her talk. She really worked, with the working group. Thank you so much. And just, like you said, among all the other strategies, we need global collective partnership in order to end homelessness. Thank you so much for that presentation. At this point in time, I did mention that our co-chair, Quinn, has managed to make it. She's here. So I'm going to quietly hand over to her, so that she can make her remarks and, continue to pilot the event. Jean, I hope you can hear me. Jean, are you here? Lydia, is Jean here?
Is in the panelist section, but she'll need to come off of mute.
Okay. What about Hanta?
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Good.
Very
Good.
much, Hanta. And I don't know what happened, but it's never happened before. So I've had a new experience of not being there at the beginning.
Yes.
But just start at the end, because that was a powerful presentation, right from Dr. Indu, which we met in 2020, and it's good to see you again at the Commission on Social Development, where we really looked at homelessness in depth. And you're so right that housing, it's like a continuum, from a hostel to transition to permanent accommodation, though I now believe all governments should be looking at permanent accommodation. We've really, as we look today, we looked at the intersectionality of homelessness in all the panelists, what they brought. One thing I would like to bring out is that homelessness isn't a permanent condition. It's like something that happens on people's journey, but it's not permanent. And that people are in transition out of it. That's really important to say. Secondly, in relation to food insecurity, I think it says a lot about our countries and our government that we're still relying on food banks, though they're really important, and I've worked with them in Ireland, but it's still an issue that needs addressing. Lavon, I don't know what to say to you actually, but how important your words are and your experience. And I suppose what struck me really was that, and in the working group to end homelessness, we feel very strongly about having people with the lived experience around the table that have the solutions, and that we don't need to speak on their behalf. They are well able to speak on their own behalf. And so I was deeply, deeply touched about everything you said, and I have it all written down for future reference and maybe to be in touch with you. What I do want to say maybe that I would have said at the beginning is what is really important for us in the working group to end homelessness is that in the UN's history, we are now talking about homelessness in 70, maybe 77 years now at this stage. But in 2017, the NGO working group was established as part of our commitment to end homelessness and make homelessness our common focus for our advocacy work. We were joined by many groups, including UN agencies, member states who had shown their unique support on the issue, also UN Habitat and UNICEF. And these entities displayed their interest in bringing homelessness to socio-political forums and try and include this issue in an official resolution. In a very short space of time, the progress was significant because in June 2020, the UN Economic and Social Council adopted the first resolution on homelessness. And this was a historical moment, not just for the working group, but for people like Lavon just talked about, with a lived experience of homelessness. For us, that was really key to this resolution. And then, of course, we went on to a second resolution approved on the 16th of December 2021 by all the member states in order to eliminate all forms of discrimination against people experiencing homelessness. This new resolution is a monumental step in the right direction, highlighting homelessness with all 193 member states. These resolutions are very, very important to us because they strengthen our efforts to raise the visibility of the significant issues of homelessness and all we heard today. So whilst we may celebrate our achievements as a working group to end homelessness, it's only the beginning of our journey. And this conversation today, this afternoon from me here in New York, is really important in delving deeper into the issues. So thank you very much indeed for all your contributions. And now I have the great pleasure to introduce our friend and diplomat even, Hanta Fida Klein. Now, Hanta has been an extraordinary support to the UN, our working group to end homelessness, and the member states of the UN. Hanta, you know we couldn't be here without you today. It's just important. Hanta is a career diplomat of the Republic of Madagascar and has been serving at the Foreign Ministry of Madagascar for 20 years. After 11 years as a counselor at the Permanent Mission of Madagascar to the United Nations in New York, Hanta went back to her home country in 2020 and is now head of the political pole at the Center for Analytical and Strategic Studies. And a great friend, and I'm sure we nearly have weekly conversations, Hanta, with you in relation to all forms of homelessness. I won't go on any further, but I want to give you the floor now. Your Excellency, Hanta Klein. Unmute yourself, Hanta.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm really, really sorry for this misadventure with the connection. So I see that we don't have too much time left. So thank you so much, Jean, for introducing me. And maybe we can go just to point out two very important points that have been raised earlier by Mr. Indu. The international collaboration is very important. I think that's the reason, one of the reasons of this resolution. The whole entire planet and world has to work together to achieve this ending homelessness goal. So now, if you allow me, I would like to introduce the next speaker. I suppose it's Jessica Hager. I'm sorry. Forgive me if I mispronounce. So Jessica Hager, for more than a decade, has been focused on social.
Sorry, Hanta.
Yes.
Sorry, we've had all the speakers, while, we couldn't connect with you. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so, at this point, you just give us your remarks and then you moderate the
Oh,
Q&A.
okay. All right.
Thank you
Okay,
so
I'm
much.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
I was a
No,
little
I
bit late.
know. Yeah.
I missed the first part. So yeah, my remarks is really I just had the time to hear the remarks of Mr. Indu Prakash from I think what he said is very important. I wanted to highlight again this international cooperation. International working together, networking is very important, but not only internationally, but also on a national level. I think every country needs to work first on a national basis and then at an international level to raise awareness and to work to fight homelessness. And that's the point of those two resolutions. That's a huge step, but many other steps have to be are waiting for us to help ending homelessness. I would like to highlight maybe something because we are today talking about poverty to achieve inclusive recovery and dignity for all through the SDGs. And indeed, we still have homeless, it's impossible to end SDGs and they should not be left behind. And also, I would like to highlight something which is also important in my country, for example, Madagascar. We have a lot of natural disasters due to the climate change issue. So we have many people who become homeless just the one day to another, and this is also something that has to be addressed in this entire homelessness issue. That many other problems can also trigger homelessness. I don't want to take too much time because we need the room for the question and answer, but I was very happy to be here and to share a little bit my views. And I just really so important to address homelessness around the world. And I still insist global networking, working together is very important. And that's why we have the resolutions at the United Nations. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I guess, I'm sorry, I'm nearly lost. So now I guess it's the time for question and answer.
Yes.
If our attendees can put their questions and answers in the chat, I'm happy to kind of surface some particular questions for the group.
Okay. So I have to see where the question and answers.
At the bottom of your screen, there is a chat function, so you can click on that and people can put their questions and answers right into the chat.
Okay. Okay, so we have some I'm trying to see the questions. Okay. We have a question here to address to Mrs. Lavon. So, what the question is that, what provisions or acts do you mean regarding community intervention and government intervention, as you mentioned in the solution? Are there any special national legislative bodies or bylaws being practiced in order to address inequality? So this is a question that is addressed to Mrs. Lavon.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Hunter. Yeah, so when I mentioned some solutions for government interventions and community interventions, here in the States, we have some government interventions happening, and also at the nonprofit level in communities. And one of the big pushes we've been advocating for is some new wording is called flex funding, where we've advocated for the government to allow many programs in their funding to provide flex funding to survivors who are survivors of domestic violence and other issues seeking housing. And with that, they can determine how they want to use that money, because as we know, people who are experiencing the issue of homelessness, they know what's best for them. And so whether the government gives it directly to survivors or the monies come directly through a program, meaning a nonprofit that they can apply to and state the amount that they need for the funding. And there are some programs who have started that already, but we're really doing a big push advocating for that to be something that is normalized, right? Something that is available no matter where you end up going. So that's one of the big things we've been doing. And in the administration under our president, Joe Biden, they are working on the Build Back Better bill, that plan. And in there, they have put millions and millions of dollars towards housing, and towards the housing, they have used it for vouchers. And so my hope is that at some point we will flip some of that money to turn into development money and not just vouchers, because the vouchers are great and not taken away from the vouchers, but to advocate with our government also to really put millions and millions of those dollars towards development, because a voucher is only as good as the paper is written on if there's no housing for the people to go, or the people have to end up moving thousands of miles away just to get housing. And one of the things I have to backtrack, I'm not backtracking, but to add for people to understand, when we talk about affordable housing, we also need to have accessible housing, right? It can't just be affordable. We have to make it accessible for people, and particularly people with disabilities, right? So all those pieces come. So our communities could play a big part by supporting your nonprofits, right? Of ensuring that people who are homeless or experiencing insecurities in their homes, that they can find adequate places to live and assess those places. So I hope that answers some of your question, with the short amount of time that we have.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lavon. I think what you mentioned on affordable housing and also accessible housing is very important. I hope the answer, the question, I hope the person who asked the question is satisfied with the answer. That I think it was a very, very extensive answer, and it's so important to have those details about homelessness. Now I have a second question. I think it's going to be the last question because the time now is almost time. And this question is from, let me see. I'm sorry, I have to. Okay. Now I have, okay, so that's the last question. It's from it's from Maureen Chukura. So it's addressed to Dr. Enemona. So Maureen would like ask Dr. Enemona. I hope I'm sorry if I mispronounced, and to kindly share possible outputs on the outcomes from the case study you mentioned in your presentation. Doctor, you have the floor.
Okay, so I'm just going to briefly answer Maureen's question. So I didn't have enough time to expand on the case studies earlier. But basically what the case studies were trying to show was how solutions were individual based and not a tick box exercise. Like homeless people were not just numbers in sheets, but solutions were personalized based on individuals' circumstances. So that example was a homeless man who had been homeless and left Newcastle for a long time and had been living in London. However, he felt like he wanted to go back to Newcastle, but the team that were handling his case, although they were really supportive and listened to his request to go back to Newcastle, they helped him to secure accommodation up in Newcastle, and they followed him up there to see the place. And when they got there, they realized that that wasn't the Newcastle he was familiar with, before he left down south to London. And he wasn't comfortable with the environment. And because the team, the social housing team, and the support system were there with him, they could see how uncomfortable he was. And immediately he could just say that he didn't recognize this place, and his family back in Newcastle didn't even want to have anything to do with him. So I just put that example there to show the importance of individual-based solutions, and how it kind of helps the whole narrative of right-based solution, because he was treated as a human, and it was like his right to kind of provide all the support he needed to get up his feet. But in some cases, like some governments will provide solutions, and it's kind of on a general basis, and most times it's just all about providing houses or housing that is mostly hostels. And it's like a tick box exercise. Oh, okay, he was homeless, we got him a place, and it's done, our job is done. But in most cases, it goes beyond that in solving the problem. So that was kind of the case study that I put up there in my presentation. I hope it explains it better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. I hope I well pronounced your name. I'm really sorry, Dr. Enemona Adaji.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So I see that we really already passed the time, and I think from this answer,
I think we lost Hanta again, Dr. Ify, if you want to make closing comments.
Okay. Okay. Is she back? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to thank Mrs. Hanta Klein, who, despite the challenges of this digital technology, she has managed to join us. I also want to thank you for agreeing to be part of this side event. You have been very supportive to the UN NGO working group to end homelessness. We are very, very grateful for all your support, and we hope that our journey with you will continue until we reach our last bus stop. To our speakers, honestly, you guys have been wonderful. Enemona, Jessica, Lavon, and Indu. Your presentations have clearly shown once again that the SDGs will not be fully achieved without addressing the issue of homelessness. You have also shown that homelessness can only be overcome by dealing with all the related issues such as hunger, poverty, gender inequality, affordable housing, global collaboration and partnership, as well as violation of human rights.
Yeah.
So having said that, I want to say that today's event has also gone ahead to show that ending homelessness is a task that must be supported and undertaken vigorously by all member states, the UN, the United Nations, civil society organizations, and also the private sector, because we can't do much without affordable housing. Now is the time for the UN to come forward boldly and give homelessness the full attention it deserves. So on behalf of the UN NGO Working Group to End Homelessness, I want to thank every participant, all our participants who have found time to join us today in this event. We really appreciate your presence and your contributions for those who have asked questions. I also want to thank every member of the working group, and particularly the Open Door Group, for all your efforts towards this event. Please, let's all continue to speak and fight for the homeless persons until everyone has a place where they are safe and can be called home. Thank you all, and God bless you. Thank you. Lydia, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be closing the event now, but we will be posting the recording of it on the working group channels. So be sure to follow the UN NGO Working Group to End Homelessness on LinkedIn and on Twitter to watch for all of those communications. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.